Welcome to Hot Topics in International Trade, brought to you by Braumiller Law Group and Braumiller Consulting Group. Hi, I'm Bob Brewer with Braumiller Law Group. I'm joined once again with Harold Radar Jackson, Associate Attorney.
Good morning, Bob.
Those of you who may know, we've been chatting about China for the last, actually, he and I for a long time did our podcast, which launched about a week ago. We wanted to follow up on a couple other China-related topics. Anti-dumping and countervailing duty.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, delving into this, it's kind of amazing when you think about how does this actually happen, where one country has a product that's actually getting subsidized and just dumped into another market where it's unfair trade practices. What's the scope of China right now? What are they actually dumping into the U.S.?
Sure. So there's just as a general overview for these sort of investigations and orders, China really dominates in anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders. There are anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders and investigations from products from other countries, but right. There are certainly a significant number from China.
Okay.
And so while these range from anywhere from honey, stevia products to wooden furniture, especially aluminum extrusions, which is a very general terminology for a large group of products.
Yeah.
And these really aren't focused on a particular HTS code, so it's really relying on the product description of the scope that comes along with the order, which really describes products to a very specific degree. It can be very general and offer very limited exclusions.
Gotcha. Well, I think when I think about steel, like China is one of the major manufacturers of steel product, and I know about this, Harold.
Yeah.
You know how I know about it? I grew up a steel brat. My dad was an executive with United States Steel. My first job out of college was with oil division of U.S. Steel. What is that? It's basically putting pipe down a hole to drill. ExxonMobil, Shell. All right. Before they did this, they actually had to have a third-party inspection. Well, U.S. Pipe was getting rejected at the location because they can't afford a blowout. And I found out during the years that I was there, I was head of the reclamation department, actually. All that scrap across Canada, U.S., it was my job to resell that, have it refurbished. But I'm telling you, it was a lot of U.S. steel that was getting rejected. Who was making good pipe? Nippon, Mannesmann, the Germans. And I think about China and the dumping, and I thought, they don't make good quality steel. But, they have so much going on. Now, they're starting to taper off a little bit in the steel manufacturing process. They're actually thinking about the environment, too, because they can't breathe their own air.
Right. Well, from a steel and metals manufacturing standpoint, China has really upped its production of that, and it's much cheaper for them to do that with labor costs and their lower resource costs, and so they're able to produce it at lesser value than it is to produce in the United States, where steel manufacturing is constantly going down, and prices for labor and other materials for manufacturing steel is going up. And other metals too, like aluminum, and especially for aluminum as well. So really, steel and aluminum, I would say, are two that go tandem as far as high-risk imports are concerned from China. Yeah.
Well, give us an example now of how someone can file a complaint, all right, and there's an investigation.
Sure. So typically how anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders come about are through an order from the Department of Commerce. Okay. And these orders come from investigations that are initiated by U.S. domestic petitioners of certain industries. It could be a company, it could be an industry group, advocating for higher duties on these products that are being dumped, meaning being put into the U.S. market under less than fair market value, or subsidized to a high degree. For example, the foreign product is subsidized by the foreign country if it's exported. Right. So that's an export subsidy that they're given so they can compete on the global stage while still being able to retain their certain practices.
What pops into your head right now as far as like a standout for what's going on right now as far as that, an investigation that's pending? Anything that pops out like?
So just recently, steel freight couplers from Mexico and China, they're under investigation, and the rate the going dumping rate, the duty rate for that is estimated to be over 100% of the value of that good. So anywhere from maybe like 80% to 160%.
I give that's weird because I saw the other day. I can't
And
remember
that's
what I was
steel.
supposed-
And
0% to
dealing-
550%. But you're saying some of these, it's unlimited what they can actually charge.
That's true. So 500% of the value of the good as an additional duty rate is a large number. However, I've seen some, for example, mattresses from China. Just a few years ago, there was an order that came out, and the duty rate, the additional duty rate for mattresses was 1,700% for any mattresses coming from anywhere in China, with very few exceptions for certain manufacturers.
Wow.
And even the dumping rate for those Chinese manufacturers was over 100%. So you're talking that this is definitely focused on wiping out import sector for industries.
Yes.
And so it really, these duties are not meant to collect revenue. They're meant to protect domestic industries.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as far as the investigation goes, scope ruling come into play. I mean, things like that.
Sure. So actually recently, the Department of Commerce released some new rules that streamlined the scope ruling process.
Okay.
So for those who are unaware of what a scope is, the scope is the language of the order that encompasses the product, and a company can apply for a scope ruling, which will be decided by the Department of Commerce as to whether their product is within or out of the scope of the order, meaning whether their products would be subject to duties or not.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of that, what are the different types of consequences? Let's say investigation takes place. It's found that this is in fact justifiable. All right, amendment to be made. What kinds of things come into play there then, as far as consequences outside of that? Just duties in general? I mean, we're talking about not just anti-dumping, there's countervailing duties now. All right.
Sure. So both anti-dumping and countervailing duties, these investigations take months,
All right.
years sometimes to finalize. And during some of these preliminary processes, something called liquidation is suspended for products that may be within the scope.
Okay.
And this may be suspended for months or years while this is investigated. And if there's a positive determination that these would be subject to duties, the entries of that company over that span of time would be liquidated, and they'd be required to pay the rate.
Yeah, possibly end up in bankruptcy.
Exactly.
Well, I mean,
and so again, this is really like a company wiping out sort of procedures, and it's really meant to protect the domestic industry that initially files the petition.
Right.
And so it could be really hard on importers who maybe don't know the origin of their products that well.
Yeah.
Are not up to date on these orders, which can be very complicated, convoluted, and are very difficult to track sometimes. Also, this is definitely a big message for brokers, forwarders who are dealing with importers and companies who trade these products. They also need to be thinking about what their clients are doing. Are their clients complying? Are their clients paying the right duty? Are they circumventing
Absolutely.
any sort of duties?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, okay, so based on what you're saying, I need to be compliant then. What are the things that I need to be thinking about and doing to stay out of this situation?
Sure. So now more than ever, there's commerce and customs are really focused on transshipment, where a product from one country will be moved through another and then labeled as the order of the country, the intermediate country that it moved through. And so this is extremely prevalent for products that are from China and are moved through Vietnam, Malaysia, and other countries, even the Dominican Republic as of recently, and it's stamped with the label as country of origin of that intermediate country.
Gotcha.
And for those, both commerce will initiate its own independent circumvention investigations. Parallel to that, customs may also initiate an evasion investigation for the same transshipment practices. So during an evasion investigation, customs can not only initiate interim measures while that customs investigation is going on, but also confer with commerce as to what should be done next. So there's a really deep focus for that going on.
Wow. And I think about too. I look on the International Trade Commission's website just to see what's out there pending and who's
Sure, yeah.
complaining. WTO also gets involved, even though they feel that doesn't have much weight these days. But a lot of things going on in the world as far as this, the anti-dumping, and it's just crazy that what you might end up paying. It's just insane. Put a company out of business, like I said. Now, the other thing that I wanted to, as far as China is concerned. I mean, I need to have you give me your take right now, globally, yeah, because
just talking China.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think about this every day. Honestly, it's just on my mind. I always like to keep up on what Xi Jinping's doing, because hey, as the world goes, so does international trade.
Sure, and he has especially gone. He's succeeded his 2-year term under the
absolutely
Communist Party term limit, and that's really lost a lot of global investors in China.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that. Hong Kong is a prime example of that.
Yeah,
mass exodus out, us slapping the tariffs on. We're treating you just like China now, Hong Kong. Sorry, and. They actually opened up the zero COVID as a result. They saw the effect it had on their GDP.
They did.
Yeah, and they're like, wow, we need to unwind this a little bit, and let's see, are companies actually going to start coming back? Well, it's China now. It's not Hong Kong anymore.
Right. Post-COVID, things have changed a lot there.
Yeah.
Especially during COVID, and then during its changes under certain laws under China, which, by the way, under certain agreements with Britain was not supposed to happen until the 2040s.
That's right.
So this was definitely a accelerated movement by China, and Taiwan is next.
I know.
In its
That's
eyes,
sad but true. I mean, he made the point, though, in this 20th Congress that's a priority to him.
It is.
And I'm thinking, Z, come on, man.
And I'd say it's more of a challenge than Hong Kong, because while Hong Kong was recognized by the world as under the jurisdiction of China, was eventually going to be under the rules of China at some point, but it was recognized as a different customs territory of China. And so certain export and import restrictions from the U.S. maybe didn't apply to Hong Kong as those that did to China.
Right.
Now that's completely different. If something's made in Hong Kong, it's no longer country of origin Hong Kong, it's country of origin China.
That's right.
And
that was a big flick of the switch.
It was, and so was export controls too. So it used to be able to go. Sometimes things used to be able to go to Hong Kong that were prohibited from China, but it's China now.
Yep.
Now, while we do try to recognize Taiwan in different ways, it's much more of a gray area.
Yes, it is.
And so I think it's definitely more of a challenge for China, and it's certainly in a hard place economically. So,
well, you and I are going to end up having to discuss country of origin at one point, because transshipment comes into play there. And I always think about where, all right, I'm going to get out from underneath these tariffs, right? I'm going to relocate my factory to Malaysia, to Taiwan, or whatever. But the problem is, you're still sourcing from China,
sourcing something, right?
That's
Components,
right.
materials.
Keywords: substantial transformation.
Yep.
And a lot of companies run into this, where it's still country of origin China. You're either trying the transshipment, or you moved your plant, but you really haven't, technically.
That's right. And so customs does recognize certain rules for determining the country of origin of a product.
Yep.
And that is substantial transformation, which goes to really a bunch of factors in the manufacturing process and the outcome and essential character of that product afterwards.
That's right.
And just as an additional note, too, the Department of Commerce likes customs tests for substantial transformation and country of origin, but it also likes to administer its own tests when it wants to.
Yeah.
So sometimes the Department of Commerce for anti-dumping duties doesn't follow over to regular customs determinations, and Commerce could require a number of other factors to be present. And for example, certain solar cells, the anti-dumping and countervailing duties on certain solar cells from China have a very restricted definition of when it's transformed.
Yeah.
So even if it's assembled and put together and manufactured into larger panels, larger products, there's going to be dumping duties on that solar panel most likely.
Oh, yeah. All right, and Harold and I are going to keep on with the China discussions. Honestly, I got to tell you, man,
we can't stop talking about China.
I can't. I was watching a PBS special. It's about 2 hours long, and it has everything to do with how far China has come with AI in general.
Oh yeah.
As a society, I mean, it's amazing the technology that they've implemented. I mean, it's an invasion of privacy here in the United States, what they're
Certainly.
doing.
It's global surveillance.
Yes, it is, but wow, they are just doing leaps and bounds. Not ahead of us yet, but it's coming.
Certainly. They have certainly a lot of investment in in universities' research, product development, and again, that does go to what we discussed about semiconductors as well, and a lot of restrictions which are targeting growing industries in China.
Well, we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen, because there's a lot more to discuss here with China. Thanks for stopping by, Harold, though.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Bob.
All right. See you.
Relax. We've got you covered. Global trade compliance to us is just another day at the beach.